In ancient Rome, daily life varied greatly depending on one's social class. Roman society was built on sharp class divisions, which were reflected in every aspect of daily life. At the top were senators and aristocratic families. Below them were wealthy merchants known as equites. The largest segment consisted of the plebeians, or common people. Slaves were at the very bottom of society and were not legally considered individuals. Wealthy Romans generally lived in large single-family homes called domus. While these houses appeared simple from the outside, their interiors were quite elaborate. The courtyard formed the center of the house, containing a pool that collected rainwater. The walls were decorated with frescoes, and the floors were covered with mosaics. The interior design of the houses was geared towards hosting guests and displaying social status. In contrast, the common people lived in multi-story apartment buildings called insula. These structures were generally narrow, crowded, and unhealthy. Shops were located on the ground floors, and living conditions deteriorated as one ascended to the upper floors. Fires and building collapses were common problems. Although the Roman administration occasionally implemented regulations to mitigate these issues, life was difficult and unsafe for the people living in the insulas. Dietary habits in Rome also varied according to class. While the wealthy could afford lavish feasts rich in meat, fish, vegetables, and fruit, the majority of the population subsisted on basic foodstuffs. Bread, olives, cheese, and wine formed the basis of Roman cuisine. Wine was usually drunk mixed with water. Meat consumption was limited, especially for the poor, and was only possible on feast days or special occasions. In Rome, food was not only a matter of nutrition, but also a social event. Feasts held in wealthy homes were of great importance in demonstrating the power and status of the host. At these feasts, guests ate while reclining, and many different dishes were served accompanied by long conversations. Such events held a central place in the social life of the Roman elite. Baths were also an important part of daily life. Roman baths were used not only for cleansing, but also for socialization. Baths were extensive complexes with hot and cold sections, gymnasiums, and restrooms. Many Romans, rich or poor, visited the baths daily. Baths were one of the rare places where class distinctions were partially blurred. Work life in Rome was also diverse. Craftsmen, carpenters, blacksmiths, tailors, and bakers formed the backbone of the city's economy. Merchants traded throughout the Mediterranean, ensuring the economic vitality of the empire. Ports and marketplaces were the busiest areas of Roman cities. Slavery was a fundamental element of the Roman economy. Slaves were employed in agriculture, mining, domestic work, and public service. Some slaves were educated and could take on roles such as teaching or accounting. The status of slaves depended entirely on their owners. However, some slaves could be freed and attain emancipated status. The family structure in Rome was patriarchal. The pater familias was at the head of the family and held legal authority over all members. This authority theoretically even encompassed decisions of life and death. Although these powers softened over time, authority within the family largely rested with the father. Women had limited social standing, but they were not entirely ineffective. Women could not vote or hold official positions, but they played significant roles in managing the household, especially in wealthy families. Some women were able to engage in trade and own property. In daily life, women actively participated in religious ceremonies and social events. Childhood was a short period in Roman society. Children were prepared for their social roles from a young age. Boys were educated and directed towards public life, while girls were prepared for housework and family life. Education was particularly important for the upper classes and encompassed fields such as rhetoric, law, and philosophy. Entertainment was an integral part of daily life in Rome. Theater plays, gladiatorial combats, and chariot races were very popular. Large structures like the Colosseum hosted these entertainments. These events also served to distract the public from problems and maintain social order. Religious life permeated every aspect of Roman society. Roman religion was polytheistic, and offering sacrifices and prayers to the gods were common in daily life. Small altars were found in homes, and family deities were regularly worshipped. Religious ceremonies held a significant place in both individual and public life. The concept of time also shaped daily life in Rome. The day was divided according to sunrise and sunset, and hours varied according to the season. This directly affected the work and rest schedule. The calendar was filled with religious holidays and official days. City life was one of the most distinctive features of the Roman Empire. Roads, aqueducts, sewage systems, and public buildings were examples of Roman engineering reflected in daily life. This infrastructure made city life possible and facilitated the administration of the empire. However, beneath all this order and splendor, there were serious problems: overcrowding, epidemics, fires, and class inequality formed the dark sides of Roman life. For the poor in particular, life meant a constant struggle. In ancient Rome, life was shaped by order, tradition, and discipline on the one hand, while on the other hand, it was fraught with great inequalities and uncertainties. This complex structure was one of the fundamental elements that made Roman society both strong and fragile. In ancient Rome, the understanding of health and disease was an important, yet often overlooked part of daily life. Medical knowledge was largely based on Greek medicine. Hippocrates' ideas were widely accepted in the Roman world, and the idea that diseases stemmed from natural causes, not the wrath of the gods, gradually began to take root. Nevertheless, superstitions and religious practices remained important among the people. Although the medical profession was respected in Rome, there was no regular education system. Many physicians were of Greek origin and were either slaves or freedmen. While wealthy Romans could afford private physicians, the poor generally turned to healers or temples. Offerings were made and prayers were offered in temples for the healing of the sick. The concept of cleanliness was relatively developed in Roman society. Bathhouse culture was considered important not only socially, but also for health reasons. However, crowded bathhouses sometimes created fertile ground for the spread of disease. While sewage systems and aqueducts improved hygiene conditions in large cities, they did not have the same effect in every region. Epidemics could cause serious losses in Roman cities. Diseases spread rapidly, especially in densely populated areas. Limited medical knowledge made combating these epidemics difficult. Despite this, the Roman administration attempted to take measures to protect public health during certain periods. Life expectancy was quite low compared to today. Child mortality was common, and many people died young. For those who survived, old age was a difficult period with limited support. The family structure played a fundamental role in the care of elderly individuals. Death was considered a natural part of life in Roman society. Funeral ceremonies varied according to social status. Wealthy families held lavish ceremonies, while the poor settled for simpler burials. Belief in the existence of the soul after death was paramount, and respect for ancestors was of great importance. Cemeteries in Rome were generally built outside the city. Tombstones contained short inscriptions reflecting the identity and social standing of the deceased. These inscriptions are among the important historical sources that have survived to this day. Military service was both a duty and a means of advancement in Roman society. For men, especially those from lower classes, the army was a way to obtain a regular income and social status. The Roman army was known for its disciplined structure, and soldiers were required to serve for many years. The lands or citizenship rights granted at the end of military service were attractive to many. In Rome, the legal system played a central role in regulating daily life. Legal rules covered areas such as property, marriage, inheritance, and trade. Roman law gradually developed a systematic structure and profoundly influenced subsequent civilizations. Rural life was quite different from urban life. Peasants generally engaged in agriculture and worked for large landowners. Although life in the countryside was simpler, dependence on natural conditions increased uncertainty. Harvest seasons were the most critical times in peasant life. A cultural unity developed in Rome over time. Traditions from different regions merged within Roman culture, creating a common way of life. Language, law, and administrative structure were fundamental elements of this unity. However, local traditions did not completely disappear. They continued to exist alongside Roman life. Clothing was an important indicator of status in Roman society. The toga was considered the official attire of male citizens. Women wore garments called stolas. The clothing styles of slaves and foreigners were simpler and more restrained. Clothing clearly indicated a person's social standing. In Rome, the concept of leisure was particularly important, especially for the upper classes. Leisure time, called otium, was devoted to contemplation, reading, and social interaction. In contrast, negotium referred to work and public duties. This distinction reflected the Roman elite's understanding of life. During the imperial period, Rome was not only a political center, but also a cultural hub. Art, architecture, and literature were intertwined with daily life. Monuments, temples, and public buildings formed the visual framework of Roman life. Life in ancient Rome changed and evolved over long centuries, acquiring different characteristics in each period. However, its fundamental structure was based on discipline, hierarchy, and tradition. This structure ensured Rome's longevity, but also laid the groundwork for its decline. For individuals living in the Roman world, life was a constant balance between order and uncertainty. This balance has made ancient Rome one of the most comprehensive and impressive civilizations studied throughout history. In ancient Rome, the belief system permeated almost every aspect of daily life. Roman religion was based more on rituals and traditions than on rigid dogmas. It was believed that establishing a proper relationship with the gods was essential for the well-being of both the individual and the state. Therefore, religious practices were seen more as a social duty than a personal belief. Every Roman household had small altars dedicated to the gods believed to protect the family. Food and drink offerings were regularly made to these gods. The head of the household was responsible for conducting these rituals. Religious ceremonies were an indispensable part of both daily life and specific periods of the year. State religion was also of great importance. Temples were not only places of worship, but also centers of public life. Major religious festivals were celebrated with mass ceremonies and sacrifices. These ceremonies brought the people together and strengthened the sense of social unity. Divination and fortune-telling were common in Roman life. Before making state decisions, oracles were consulted, interpreting the flight of birds or the internal organs of sacrificed animals. These practices were particularly important before political and military decisions. In Rome, the calendar was shaped according to religious and agricultural activities. The year was divided by various festivals and commemorative days. On these days, public affairs ceased, and the public participated in ceremonies. The calendar also dictated the work schedule. Marketplaces played a central role in city life. The Forum was a space for both trade and public debate. Shopping took place here, trials were held, and political speeches were made. The Forum was considered the heart of the city of Rome. Transportation and communication in Rome were made possible by a developed road network. Paved roads connected all parts of the empire. These roads facilitated military movement and also enabled the development of trade. Inns and resting places were located along the roadsides. The postal and communication system was vital, especially for the state. Official messengers could quickly deliver orders and news to distant parts of the empire. This was one of the factors that enabled Rome to govern its vast territories. In Rome, education was a significant privilege for the upper classes of society. Children first received basic reading and writing instruction, then were trained in fields such as rhetoric and philosophy. Good speaking skills were indispensable for political and legal success. Education was more limited for the lower classes. Many children began working at a young age to contribute to the family economy. Nevertheless, practical knowledge and vocational skills were highly valued in Roman society. Cultural life revolved around theater and literature. Theater plays were both entertaining and offered moral lessons. Comedies and tragedies were followed with great interest by large audiences. Poetry and historical writing were important elements of Roman intellectual life. Historians aimed to both transmit knowledge and reinforce social values by recording Rome's past. These works were influential in the formation of Roman identity. During the imperial period, cities became carriers of the Roman way of life. Roman law, language, and architecture spread to the conquered lands. This process is called Romanization. Local populations gradually adopted the Roman way of life. Despite this, there were significant differences within the empire. The eastern provinces possessed older and more established cultures. In these regions, Roman administration sought to maintain its presence in harmony with local traditions. Roman citizenship was a significant status symbol. Citizens possessed legal rights and had a special bond with the state. Over time, citizenship rights were expanded and became more widespread throughout the empire. Discipline and order were paramount in daily life. Roman society was built on adherence to tradition. Respect for ancestors, family honor, and loyalty to the state were fundamental values. However, this order began to crumble with increasing economic burdens, growing inequalities, and governance problems. Especially in the later years of the empire, city life lost its former vibrancy. Life in ancient Rome continued to change over the centuries, with each generation striving to find its place within this order. The ordinary details of daily life are one of the most important keys to understanding the power and limitations of Roman civilization. The Roman world offers a long historical experience where splendor and ordinariness, order and chaos intertwine. This experience transformed ancient Rome not only into an empire, but also into a comprehensive way of life. As the empire's borders expanded, life in ancient Rome became even more complex, multifaceted, and regionally varied. There were vast differences in daily life between a citizen living in the heart of Rome and one living in a distant province of the empire. However, a common framework for life had also emerged thanks to the spread of Roman law, administrative order, and cultural customs. This framework made Rome not only a military power, but also a social system that endured for a long time. In Roman society, the day began before sunrise for most people. Craftsmen, merchants, and laborers in particular were at their workplaces in the early morning hours. Roman cities were crowded and noisy. Pack animals, vendors, soldiers, and the common people moved together in the narrow streets. Members of the upper class generally spent the mornings at home, attended social gatherings. During these gatherings, those of lower status would come to their patrons' homes seeking patronage or support. This relationship formed one of the cornerstones of Roman society, the patron-customer system. Roman homes varied greatly according to social status. Wealthy Romans lived in spacious houses with atriums, while the majority of the population resided in multi-story apartment buildings called insulae. These apartment buildings were often vulnerable to fire and collapse. The lower floors were more expensive and safer, while the upper floors were cheaper and riskier. Many insulas had limited access to clean water and shared toilets. Despite this, city life was attractive due to the work and entertainment opportunities it offered. Dietary habits also varied according to class. Bread was the staple food of the common people. Wheat, barley, and oats were widely consumed. Olive oil, wine, and vegetables were important parts of the daily diet. Meat was a less common food for the general public. It was usually eaten during festivals or after sacrificial ceremonies. The tables of the wealthy were quite lavish. Exotic spices, fish sauces, and produce from distant provinces were featured. In Rome, food was not only a matter of nutrition, but also a social activity. Roman baths were central to daily life. Baths were used not only for cleansing, but also for socializing, relaxation, and business discussions. Women and men generally entered the baths at separate times. Large bath complexes included sports fields, libraries, and gardens. Bath culture was one of the most prominent indicators of Rome's urbanized way of life. Entertainment held an important place in Roman society. Gladiator fights held in amphitheaters were events that attracted great public interest. In addition, animal hunts, athletic competitions, and theatrical performances were also common. These events were often funded by the state and used to gain public support. For Roman rulers, entertainment was a tool for political stability. Religion was an integral part of Roman life. Romans had a polytheistic belief system, and it was believed that each god was associated with a specific area of life. Small altars dedicated to family deities were found in homes. State ceremonies and religious festivals played an important role in maintaining social order. As the empire expanded over time, gods from different cultures were also incorporated into the Roman pantheon. The place of women in society, while not equal in the modern sense, was relatively more flexible compared to many societies in the ancient world. Roman women could own property, inherit, and engage in commercial activities. However, they could not directly participate in politics. The family structure was shaped around the authority of the father figure. Nevertheless, women, especially those of the upper class, had significant influence in domestic and social life. Slavery was a fundamental element of the Roman economy. Slaves were employed in agriculture, housework, mining, and even in educated professions. Some slaves could eventually gain their freedom and achieve a certain status in society. This shows that the Roman slavery system had a strict but not entirely closed structure. Education was generally dependent on the financial situation of the families. While children from wealthy families received education from private tutors, the majority of the population was content with basic literacy. Education was especially important for boys, and the art of oratory was highly valued. In Rome, good speaking skills were seen as the key to political and social advancement. Life in ancient Rome presented a structure where disciplined order and daily practices were intertwined. Law, the army, city planning, and social relations ensured the maintenance of this order. For the Roman people, life gained meaning not so much from individual freedom, but from the continuity of society and the state. This understanding enabled Rome to maintain its presence across a vast geographical area for centuries. Life in the Roman world was not confined to city centers. Much of the empire consisted of rural areas, with a significant portion of the population living in villages or on large farms. In these regions, life followed a slower, more nature-oriented and traditional rhythm. Agriculture formed the basis of the Roman economy. The production of wheat, grapes, and olives was vital for both local consumption and feeding the cities. On farms called latifundiums, run by large landowners, slaves and free laborers worked together. For Romans living in the countryside, the year was shaped by the cycle of seasons. Periods such as planting, harvesting, and grapevine were central to social life. Religious ceremonies and festivals accompanied this cycle. Rituals to ask the gods for fertility and good weather were a natural part of the peasants' daily lives. These rituals clearly reflected the practical and secular aspects of Roman religion. The Roman army had a profound influence on society. Military service offered opportunities for social advancement, especially for men from lower classes. Soldiers who served for many years could be rewarded with land or money upon retirement. Military discipline shaped the mindset of Roman citizens. Order, obedience, and a sense of duty were valued not only in the army, but also in civilian life. Roads and infrastructure were invisible but crucial elements of Roman life. Stone roads built throughout the empire facilitated trade and military mobility. Aqueducts provided cities with clean water, while sewage systems contributed to maintaining hygiene. Thanks to this infrastructure, Roman cities were among the most developed settlements in the ancient world. Trade was another element that strengthened Rome's multicultural structure. The Mediterranean became an inland sea for Rome. Grain was transported from Egypt, minerals from Hispania, and spices and silk from the east. Port cities were vibrant centers where different languages, traditions, and beliefs coexisted. This diversity contributed to the flexible and inclusive nature of Roman culture. The legal system formed the regulatory framework of Roman life. Roman law defined the rights and obligations of individuals while also reinforcing state authority. Courts were held in public spaces. Law found tangible expression in the daily lives of the people. This system, one of the most enduring legacies of Rome, profoundly influenced subsequent civilizations. The perception of time was also different in Rome than it is today. The day was divided according to the movement of the sun, hours lengthened or shortened depending on the season. The calendar was shaped by religious festivals and agricultural activities. Public holidays and playdays added regular breaks to the daily lives of the people. Old age and death were accepted as natural and inevitable realities in Roman society. Death rituals emphasized the unity of the family and society. Tombstones reflected a person's social status and the roles they assumed throughout their life. Being remembered after death was an important value in Roman culture. In ancient Rome, life reflected a world where order, not the individual, took precedence. People saw themselves as part of their families, classes, and the state. This perspective strengthened the social bonds that ensured Rome's longevity. The ordinary details of daily life became fundamental elements that made the continuity of the great empire possible. Therefore, ancient Rome can be understood not only through conquests and emperors, but also through the people walking the streets, the working peasants, the citizens meeting in the baths, and the shopping taking place in the marketplaces. Rome's true strength lay in the stability and continuity of this daily life.